Welcome everyone to the Client Engagement at a Turning Point webinar hosted by ClearPath Analysis in partnership with SimCorp. For those joining us who I haven't had the pleasure of meeting before, I'm Noel Hillman, the Chief Executive of ClearPath Analysis. I'd like to personally welcome and thank you for joining us for today's event. Before we get into today's proceedings, I'd like to take a moment to talk you through some of the functionality of a Zoom webinar, for those who aren't familiar with the functionality of such events. At the bottom of the screen, you will see the Q&A and chat function. Shortly, the question for today's roundtables will be posted into the chat area, so you'll be able to follow the debate questions as we go. Please feel free to post your comments into the chat area. We do want this to be interactive, not just for the panelists, but also for you, our audience. Any questions for the panelists, please do put them into the Q&A area. Feel free to post them in there, and our moderator for today, Sarah Benwell, will come to them very shortly. As we get started in today's event, we'll post the first of 3 polls, so please do look out for those and you'll be able to see how your fellow audience members are responding as well to the issues that we pose. Should you at any point be having any issues with hearing or seeing the videos, please do firstly check your internet connection. And if you're still having problems, the best course of action will be to exit and come back into the webinar again. Often it's those simple measures which can correct the technical issues for you. Well, that's all from me in the way of introductions. I'm going to now pass over to Sarah Benwell, editor of fundoperator.com, which is our trade market intelligence site for the global fund operations community. Sarah's going to be moderating today's event and she will be introducing in our panelists. So if you give me a moment, I'll bring them up onto stage for you. Okay, excellent. Hello, Sarah.
Hi, I think I'm working and it's all operating properly, so that's good.
Indeed so, indeed so. So I'll pass you over to, I'll stop sharing my screen now and I'll pass you over to our panelists to get going. I'll be here in the background. So over to you, Sarah, when you're ready, and I'll get our first poll launched.
Great, thank you. So before we kick off, I'm just going to introduce all of our panelists today. So first up, we have Paul Synthanon, Senior Analyst at 80 Group. We've also got, hi, Paul.
Hi there, Sarah.
Hi. We've also got Phil Lynch, Senior Strategy Principal at SimCorp. Hi, Phil.
Hello, Sarah.
Hey, and last but not least, we've got Greg Klotz, Vice President, Client Experience at Nuveen. Hi, Greg.
Hi, Sarah, and thanks for having me.
Great. So hopefully, but we're about to kick off with some questions, but the first poll should now be up. So the first poll is, how has traditional client reporting infrastructure been challenged? And the possible answers are increasingly complex client mandates, integrating additional data sources, lack of automation and data quality control, and meeting demands for ad hoc requests outside of traditional reporting cycles. So we'll come back to have a look at your answers to that in a second, but if you could all make sure you answer that poll, and in the meantime, we'll start our discussion. So my first question is, a recent survey by 80 found that the investment management industry is lagging behind other industries when it comes to digital innovation in client communications. So what I wanted to know is, why do you think that this is happening and what might challenge this? And Paul, perhaps I can come to you first.
Sure, thanks, Sarah. I guess in terms of a quick introduction, IT Group, we're a research advisory firm focused on operations and technology for the wider financial services. And I sit within the capital markets team covering the buy and sell side. For this particular study, we've been covering client communications reporting for the asset management community since the firm's founding over 16 years ago. And I have the responsibility of client reporting coverage on behalf of our clients. And I think over the last few years, the investment management universe, understanding what kind of future holds for client communications, service, and engagement. So when it comes to the content of the report and the findings, we really tried to frame it in the world that we live in now, which is COVID, right? COVID-19 in a kind of remote working world. So I think it was very timely to engage with the market. But in terms of the feedback, in general, I think that from an traditional operational perspective, from a client reporting perspective, most firms were able to handle that shift to work from home. And again, no real operational challenges except for probably the two things, which is the spike in ad hoc reporting, which is obviously one of the answer options that we provided. And then I would say the other one would be the I guess the increasing complex client mandates, right? There's a lot more types of types of funds that are being launched all over the place in global kind of environments. So the pressure on client reporting teams is increasing. So, those I would say the traditional kind of challenges. Now, obviously, we kind of engage with the asset management community to understand what's happening in the future, and I would say that a lot of firms are not considering or planning ahead when it comes to kind of digital communications in particular. And if I could maybe just summarize, we really think that industry is defined by two groups at the moment. One group, which are the leaders within, I would call the client kind of communications, are really putting clients first and looking into how to better engage with them, better understand I guess the interactions with the investment management firm across the different client touch points, and obviously collecting that data and using that data to better serve their clients. I think one manager even went so far to say, they want to be the Facebook or Amazon of the investment world when it comes to client engagement and client experience. So, they're setting the bar quite high. And then we have obviously the other managers who I would call the laggards, again, take a very traditional view on client reporting and communications in particular, and really just focus on operational metrics. Are we delivering on time? Is it accurate? And you're not really looking at what kind of additional value that you can add to the process, and you're not really connecting the dots to the other teams. So we see those two groups, and I think I think this report tries to highlight why they think that, right? And I think we're going to go through some of those points as we debate, but also at the same time try to maybe convince them to look at their kind of, I guess, assumptions and question them and maybe reconsider their strategy going forward. And I think, again, we'll talk about the benefits of doing that again throughout the conversation today.
Great, thank you. That's a great start and really interesting. Greg, perhaps I can come to you next. What's your take on why it is that the fund management industry is lagging behind others, and what are how can some of those challenges be overcome?
Sure, and I certainly hope, kind of piggybacking off Paul's answer, that Nuveen is a leader as it relates to client communications. That's certainly something I'm focused on in my role within client reporting and client portal oversight across kind of our global business with institutional and wealth-focused clients. I think a lot of it, though, kind of piggybacking off Paul's comments, is really around focus. If you think about over the past decade or so, there's been a tremendous amount of innovation in the industry as it relates to product development. The adoption of ETF as a wrapper, the proliferation of alt products in different sub-asset classes. Think about all the M&A. I think there's more M&A activity actually announced this morning in the industry, and then also just general international expansion and more developing markets getting into the industry. So I think there's been a bit of a focus on some of those elements within an asset manager, and you can only do so many things well at one time. But kind of again, kind of agreeing with what Paul was saying, we've seen with this kind of COVID-19 push to digital interaction and supplementing some of the in-person interactions with a digital experience through a portal, we believe that we're seeing anecdotally, and we're hoping to get more and more feedback on this, that there's kind of a shift in the industry expectations that we're going to have to back up the client experience and the investment experience through a digital portal. So.
Thank you. That's a great insight. And coming lastly across to Phil, can you give me a sense of what you're seeing in the marketplace and what you think, are some of the reasons for these lags and what might challenge them?
Well, thank you. I think a lot of it actually came through in the IT survey, where operations don't necessarily make the connection between what they're producing and what the customers are using. I was surprised particularly by how few companies actually do client surveys. but then there's a complete lack of visibility, tangible, measurable feedback on how is what I'm already producing being received? How often is it being used? Are the reports being opened? And I think there's a disconnect between kind of client reporting as an operational function and how does it really impact commercial issues such as client retention and growth. And I think it leads to one of the things that was brought up in the report that says that many operations people, many client reporting executives find it difficult to make a compelling business case. You know, they all see the problems in actually meeting the current needs, but they find it difficult to attach the importance of doing something to some of the strategic business drivers that the industry is facing around client retention and growth. And I think if there's some opportunity to connect those two, that seems to be lacking in many firms.
That makes perfect sense to me. Thank you. I think that's a really good kickoff from all of us. And now I think we'd like to have a quick look at the poll results to see what our audience said in terms of those challenges and reflect on those. So they've just popped up now, which is great. So the most common answer was lack of automation and data quality control. So that's kind of the biggest challenge to traditional client reporting. What are your thoughts on that, Phil? Is that what you'd expected? Or, you know, and interestingly, kind of client mandates and reporting cycles, which are a couple of the things that we talked about just now, were sort of lower down the list. So what are your thoughts on those results?
Surprise me, and I think it ties very well to the survey results that, you know, you saw how long it is taking firms to meet the demands for ad hoc reporting or access to the underlying data or any changes to reports, you know, because a lot of these firms have not invested in a platform over the last 4 or 5 years. There's still a huge amount of manual work, which is why many of the operational focuses are on efficiency. But clearly that doesn't seem to be happening, and many firms don't use a centralized approach to managing the data and integrating the data into their reporting systems.
Great. Perhaps if I can come to you next, Greg. You know, how surprised are you that automation was so high up the list of among our audience of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I mean, automation is critical to scale, right? As Nuveen is growing, to take it a personal experience, we need to be able to automate and have solid data quality controls. We want to try to automate some of our client reporting and even our portal generation of data and information, and kind of some of our roadmap efforts. But I didn't score too high, but I'd even say that, you know, complex mandates, we're seeing multi-asset class mandates where you're pulling in information from various accounting and analytics platforms. Can be challenging to bring that all together to the client. And then even, you know, the second piece around additional data sources, I'd say we're pretty technology rich at Nuveen. We have, you know, lots of good analytical platforms and accounting platforms that we use based on a particular asset class, given that we span a good degree of public strategies and private strategies. But then being able to bring that all together, which is kind of connected with the automation, is something that we're really focused on so that we can really improve our infrastructure, similar to kind of what Phil was mentioning in his remarks.
That makes sense to me. And Paul, coming to you last, you know, how well do you think that what our audience is saying reflects what you found in your survey? And did you find any of the results surprising, or were they kind of in line with what you had expected our audience to say?
Yeah, no, I think it's in line. You know, I think a lot of people, I think the data tends to be the source of the issue. And then obviously, you know, why do we need so much data? Like you said, is it because of complex mandates? Is it because of, you know, increasing regulatory requirements? But obviously it does come back to data quite a lot. And, you know, I think it also helps explain why there, you know, I guess within the laggard groups, which I'll call them, you know, there's obviously many firms at different stages within that, and they're focused very much on the operational aspects of reporting. And I think one of the results from our survey was that, you know, nearly over two thirds of asset managers really admit that they have structural issues when it comes to operations and dealing with the demands of, you know, traditional client reporting. So I think they're still struggling with that while having to contend with trying to think of a digital strategy and build upon, you know, that, and obviously offer both. It can be quite complex. So I'm not surprised that data did come first. But I think it's about, if you get the data right, you might be able to solve some of the other issues, right? The data infrastructure. But at the same time, the reason why you need some data is because some of the other elements. So it's kind of the chicken and the egg kind of situation here. But I think if you fix the data first, it should help support some of the other things that are going on in the industry.
Perfect. Okay, thank you. That's useful. So coming on to our next question, how can digital client engagement deliver a more compelling client experience and drive client retention and client acquisition? So Greg, if I can come to you first on this, how does digital client engagement drive retention for you and even getting new business?
Yeah, I mean, we really want a client portal that can support the end-to-end client experience across the entire journey and really offer up, if clients are interested, those digital touch points from end to end. So I'll give a couple examples perhaps to kind of illustrate the point. Thinking about, from a commercial perspective on the prospecting end, rather than having to complete a paper-based non-disclosure agreement, is there an opportunity to have that kind of live in the portal and kind of do more of a one-click process to kind of cut down timelines of paperwork and whatnot. We're also seeing operational due diligence as asset owners look to, allocate, is shifting a bit online, right? People aren't flying and getting a 200-page printout deck of all of the operational workflows and things of that nature as they do diligence on managers. Can we leverage a portal to at least allow that to all live in one home and have a rich base of information for asset owners to do diligence on potential managers? From an onboarding perspective, a similar thought around, there's a lot of very long forms that need to be completed to enter into a fund or client questionnaires. Can we create more of a TurboTax-like experience, probably timely as taxes are coming up right around the corner, where everyone's familiar, where they can have smart forms with inclusion, exclusion logic that really drill down on the questions and information that you need to capture to bring a asset owner into a potential fund. And then in the servicing point, we are certainly still investing in our standardized PDF reports, and I think we might get into that a little bit later in the discussion. We still see that as critical touch points with the client, but can we supplement that for clients that have appetite to do their own portfolio analysis attribution, as we know that asset owners aren't just invested in one asset manager, but tend to have multiple managers? Can they then go into a portal, get access to their holdings level information in an easy extractable manner so that they can bring it into their own data ecosystem to merge with other managers to do their own portfolio analysis? And so those are some of the things that, really we think a portal can support as you think about, the end-to-end client experience.
Perfect. Thanks, Greg. That's great. Phil, coming to you next, looking at what your clients are doing or the services that you provide, how can digital client engagement deliver a more compelling client experience?
Well, I think there's a lot we can learn from other industries that have gone through the same kind of competitiveness and difficulty in creating differentiation. If you're not creating sufficient differentiation on cost or performance, the obvious place to start is on customer engagement, customer satisfaction. And just like in other parts of our life, we don't always buy from the lowest cost provider. We buy from somebody who we perceive to be easy to do business with, somebody who understands us, and somebody who treats me like an individual. And the whole capability around personalization, customer self-service, those are critical functions, I think, are critical capabilities to making customers feel like their business is appreciated and helping them get to decisions faster and stop, and not have to waste time to find what they really need to when they get on and they're trying to do something in a hurry. And I think it's very difficult to know upfront exactly what they're going to react to. So, obviously, I think clients are going to need to, when they put a portal in front of customers, they're going to need to experiment and say, what kind of content, what kind of interactions could I generate with new kinds of information or contracts or other kinds of documents? But of course, if you don't have that user analytics capability to understand how are they reacting to that content, you're kind of flying blind, so it would be difficult to know which experiments are working and which experiments aren't. So I'd say that customer analytics capability is critical to being able to continue on that path and deliver what they find meaningful.
Got it. Thank you. That's really helpful. Paul, coming to you next, what do you see as some of the key ways that digital client engagement can deliver more compelling experiences and in particular drive that retention and acquisition piece?
Yeah, definitely. I think it also has to do a little bit with, I guess, one of the inhibitors for people actually investing in this a little bit, right? It's trying to create a compelling reason to log into a portal, right? So what Gregory mentioned was obviously expanding the functionality, right, to do more things on it, right? Be able to connect the dots, be able to do more, make it more time, I guess, time value, improve that. And then secondly, obviously, it's about involving the client as Phil has mentioned. In terms of design. Now that's the feedback when we talk to some of the leaders who either obviously using third parties or developing their own portals is, we're involving the client every step of the way. Why waste time and money investing in functionality that the client doesn't necessarily use or want? So that's an entirely important thing. And I think, again, for asset managers that might be thinking, well, we have a portal now, and it stores all our PDFs, and we have very low usage rates. Well, I mean, I think it's because of the functionality, right? If you just go there for them to access that, well, that's the only reason why you go on that, right? And you might have to go to many managers to do the same thing. But again, if you make a compelling offering where it's additional things where you can maybe interact with the client service representatives, or if you can get additional information about the portfolio or have access to analytics or any of that where the client can actually benefit, then I think that improves the overall chances of login rates. I think the goal is obviously not to get everyone to log in all the time, right? Because there'll be some clients who prefer what Gregory mentioned. They want it hand delivered, but there will be those type of clients and that want to be able to access that data when they want, right? And how they want it. And we're seeing that definitely in the institutional, I would say, consultant world, where they have to deliver service to their end clients. And they tend to be at higher. I guess the usage rates for these from this category is a lot higher. And then at the same time, from our research, we also looked at we asked the asset management community what features and functionality would be most important when developing a portal, when implementing a portal. And one of the most important things that came back was around the behavior analytics on the back end, right? So the information that you can collect about what your clients are clicking on, how they're looking at the data, how often they're looking at data. So that kind of data where you probably won't be able to collect from a face-to-face relationship, right? Because you're relying on just, interpretation and you don't have that aggregation. And you can't build up the client profiles and all that information that you could be collecting from multiple systems and combine it with your client reporting system as well as macroeconomic data, for example. Really trying to understand your client and your client's behavior, and again improve your potentially to market new products, to really reach out at a timely in a timely manner, specific market events, for example, or understanding of a need for example, if they have a new mandate or whatever, it's something about getting more insights quicker and faster than just waiting for your client to turn up to you and say, yeah, we want you to pitch for this. So I think those things are what has been, I guess that functionality has been the most quoted one. It's the most important one anyway, based on the survey that we did.
Thank you, that's really useful. I'm about to come to question 3, but first I just wanted to acknowledge that my video has stopped working for some reason. It's a technical thing, I am trying to fix it and hopefully it'll come back on again, but in the meantime, you're just gonna have my name, but I'm very sorry about that. Moving on now to my 3rd question. Greg, I want to start with you on this one. I just wanted to get a sense of how specific, like what you're doing to improve your clients' digital experience. Could you perhaps talk about that for a little bit?
Yeah, so in my last response, I gave a lot of examples of different things that, the capabilities that a portal can offer. I'd say that some things we have live today, some things we're kind of in pilot mode, and some things we're still just kind of thinking about. And that what we found is really important is that different clients want different things and different segments of clients want different things. And so before you just give them perhaps the Rolls Royce and spend, X amount of investment into kind of giving them, everything, we thought it was really important to take a step back and let's actually do some pilot runs. You supplement some of these beta launches with some of these functionality with surveying. We'll certainly leverage some of the research coming out of this program to help inform kind of our product roadmap. But what our vision is start to kind of get direct feedback, having direct interaction with clients of, hey, was that helpful to have in a portal, or are you just going to go refer to your standard report anyways? So that way we're delivering the highest priority things in more of an agile and quick way based on what we're hearing from the client. But the other thing that I think we're partnering on, and I heard it in both Phil and Paul's comments, is really we want that feedback loop to our client-facing teams, whether they're relationship manager, distribution. You know, you have that rich information of, you know, this client was clicking on this piece of analysis, or this client was clicking on this piece of thought leadership around responsible investing. Well, now I don't need to waste the first 15 minutes of a relationship meeting saying, hey, what do we want to talk about? What's on your mind? You can actually go into some of those client conversations and say, hey, you know, we wanted to kind of kick the tires and bring an expert in about responsible investing because we noticed that you were clicking into some of the information that we have around thought leadership, and we proposed it's beneficial for you to have that. And so we really think that that's going to be a key thing to kind of tie into not just the portal, but some of our CRM platforms. So with some of that information, and we're certainly not there yet, but we want to get there, is at the fingertips of our client-facing folks so that they can leverage some of the analytics that Phil and Paul were talking about as they go and have more informed conversations with the client that may not be in person anymore, but may be through a Zoom call, so we can make it as effective as possible. So that's really, you know, we have a long roadmap. You know, building the Rolls Royce of a portal isn't something you can kind of snap your fingers and get it overnight. So we really want to take the approach of, you know, we have hypotheses of things that clients may want, but really we want to put our eggs in the basket once we think that there's conviction from our clients in certain capabilities.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you, Greg. Phil, can I perhaps ask you the same question now? So, you know, what are you doing to improve your clients' digital experiences?
Well, I would say first, we're looking to enable our clients to do the kinds of things that Greg is discussing. And I think we chose, I want to highlight that we chose our partner, Microsoft, to build our platform for a couple of reasons. One, because the whole user experience is really critically important for adoption. Putting a tool in front of customers that they recognize, that they feel comfortable using. And clearly with Microsoft, you know, owning the office space and all of the tools that customers are used to using, putting a user interface that they're comfortable with was very important to us. Second, bringing in new kinds of content and hosting this, you know, on the Azure cloud, they have tools to help business people integrate new content without a big IT project. Some of the things we're seeing, for instance, institutional clients want to see more macroeconomic data when they log in. They want to see the yield curve, for instance. Some retail and institutional clients are very interested in integrating ESG data. And of course, there's so many different flavors of ESG data, and making that easy for people to have the context, not only of their performance, but their performance in relation to ESG ratings. And then lastly, we are taking advantage of the Microsoft Power BI, which is the underlying technology, the business intelligence capability to do that, to drive those kinds of analytics that Greg talked about, to take all the information, make it meaningful for you, and make it actionable so that you as a provider can really understand in detail, you know, what's driving engagement with your clients and how do I do more of that.
That makes sense. Thank you. Before, we're going to have a poll in a second, but before we do, there's been a couple of questions from the audience that I think it's worth us having a look at. So I'm going to put them up on the screen, I hope. But so the first one is from Sarah Sykes, and it says, for Greg and or others, on the topic of client portals, there are clearly benefits to these platforms, but the concern is always adoption. Do investors really want to log into 20, 30, 50 individual managers' portals? Any insights about how you make it worth their while to come to your portal versus expect you just to send everything they need? And I'm going to mention the second poll, the second question at the same time, because it's on a similar sort of topic. So it says, what ideas are being explored around passwords and login security? One roadblock we always hear is that clients don't want to remember multiple passwords for each and every asset manager portal, and it prevents us from investing in a more robust solution. So I guess both of those questions are looking at two different elements of the problem of multiple portals. Phil, if I can come to you first, you know, how does, you know, do investors want to log into 50 different portals? And if not, how can people make sure that their portal is the one people go to? And at the same time, you know, how do you get over the roadblock of multiple passwords?
Yeah. Well, I think all of us are struggling with how to deal with that. Thank God for password managers. And also, I think it's similar when you look at media sites. There's still no one media site that you can go to that replaces your access to all the different things that you're looking at. I think the most important thing is utility, really understanding what do clients want to do with the information that they're expecting from my website. Are they looking for, access to the underlying data so they can copy and paste that into their own internal systems? Where are they spending time? Are they interested in a commentary? And I think utility of that service, so that there's actually a reason for them to come on to your portal and look for up-to-date information, access information that they need to make decisions, and making it actionable, making it easy to access, I think is the key to bringing back to your portal whenever they need it, because they know that they're going to be able to get good utility from it.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense to me. Greg, what have you done to try and encourage your clients to come to your portals? And is there anything that you've done to help with password ease of remembering?
I mean, different clients want different things, right? And we totally appreciate that. Some clients have their own portals that they aggregate. And so we want to be flexible and try to meet clients where their needs are. So we've even kicked the tires around, we've put a lot of investment in potentially getting a portal with holdings data. I'll give a simple example. Well, rather than having the client have to log in, remember the password, can you set up, through API connections and, latest technology, a feed to send a recurring cadence and say, you know what, we don't expect you to come into Nuveen's portal, but let's set up an API feed. And these are still in the beta launch. I wouldn't say that this is something we have widespread, but we're kind of testing out and saying, if we're going to do all the work to set it up, can we set up kind of connections so that the client can ingest it more automatically without needing to go into our world? The password thing, I agree with Phil, like password manager, notes on your iPhone. Kidding, that's a little bit risky. But some things that we're trying to be flexible about and exploring. Biometrics, right? I mean, or is it biometrics? The ability to use your kind of thumb to log in if you're going to log in from a mobile device or a tablet, whatever that may be. We know that clients are tending to get more information on their iPad. So if you can use kind of your thumb scan to log into the portal, that's something that can kind of get away from it. But then, of course, we need to be knowing that there's always going to be issues and people forgetting things and something maybe getting blocked out because they try to log in 10 times. We just try to be quick from a client servicing perspective to say, you know what? Let's kind of make sure that client, it's a very important client to us. If we need to interface with our IT teams to make sure we can get them unlocked so they can get their, capital call notice or a critical document, a tax form, some of that, there's still going to be a human element to it to make the experience work.
Lovely, thank you. Paul, I know you talked a little bit earlier actually about some of the survey results in terms of how they can, drive people to one portal over another. Is there anything else you wanted to add around kind of what it is that makes somebody, why my portal rather than his portal over there?
Sure. So I guess a few things. Okay, I won't mention about the password. I think that's been kind of answered. But in terms of the multiple portal usage, when we ask the asset management community what defines a successful portal, right? It's always gone back to login rates. But then when you look a little bit deeper, especially with the firms who I think I describe as leaders, they set realistic benchmarks. And, like what Gregory said, not all clients want that. And you're not necessarily not doing what they want, right? You're still hand delivering to those clients that do. But then you're realizing or accepting the fact that there's a segment that do want to access self-service and want to do more. So for example, one asset manager said that if they get a login rate of about 25% on a quarterly basis, that is enough in terms of return on investment of their portal, right? And I think that's, again, you're not replacing anything, right? You're just offering them an alternative. And again, it's not really competing, right? Because you still have to go to other asset managers who you have mandates with, right, on the institutional side to get information if that's how they distribute it. But what you're saying is, when you come to ours, you can do a lot more, perhaps. Maybe you can do, stuff around the client onboarding, identification, AML checks, all that kind of additional stuff, where you can upload documents for other kind of tasks, while in another portal, maybe they can only download information and that's it. And they'd rather just receive that information, and they actually come to yours to do a lot more. So again, it's about, I guess it's great going to be linked to the result of the next poll, right? How do you differentiate? So we'll see if people believe that you can differentiate, and based on the customers that I spoke to on the asset management side, it's very much they think they can. So we'll see what happens in the poll results upcoming.
You've teed me up perfectly, because absolutely what we're going to do next is ask our next poll. So hopefully that should be coming up on the screen now. Great. And it's, oh, actually, I think it's still showing poll number 1 at the moment. Oh, no, there. Okay, so what are the key factors that drove or will drive your firm to invest in a digital portal? And the answers we've got are client retention, competitive differentiation, empower investors to access information when they want it and how they want it, as part of the wider digital transformation at the firm, and to better understand and predict client behavior based on their usage of data. So if everybody could answer that, and we'll just leave it up for 20 seconds or so, and then we will go straight to the results and we'll analyze them in a moment. So hopefully we'll get those soon. Right, those are up now. So in top spot with 1/3 of respondents, the top factors driving people to invest in a digital portal is to empower investors to access information when they want it and how they want it. In second place is to understand and predict client behavior, that's 24%. Then competitive differentiation with 19%, 14% as part of a wider digital transformation, and 10% at client retention. So all of them, you know, I'd say all of them, quite a few people saying each one. Paul, perhaps I can come to you first to get your initial takeaway on those results. So is that kind of the spread you were expecting? Is the top slot what you expect? Are you surprised that client retention is in last place?
No, not at all. You know, I think obviously, you know, the goal of a portal is obviously to offer self-service capabilities to clients. But I guess one of the issues that we talked about already is how do you link client reporting or client communications to more quantitative measures like client retention and client wins, right? And that's been a hard connection to make. And so I'm not surprised that that's, you know, probably the lowest out of why people would want to invest in the portal, because again, firms have not necessarily tried to or don't think it's possible to necessarily link them. You know, I probably can link it a little bit, but obviously it cannot, it's only correlation rather than causation. You cannot really be sure. But yeah, I'm not surprised that it's about self-service. It's about, you know, being able to differentiate a little bit. And yeah, it's sometimes, you know, from our survey, it's about, you know, digital transformation as wider digital transformation. You know, sometimes we see a firm going through, you know, a whole process of, you know, transforming their data strategy, right? Data management, data governance, and that kind of has, you know, piggyback projects across the board, across the investment lifecycle, including client communication. So yeah, no, nothing surprising there. And it's good to, you know, good to see that, you know, I guess the message is portals can support self-service if required, especially when they have an ad hoc question, when clients need to, you know, want it answered straight away rather than wait for someone for maybe one day or whatever it is to get the answer.
Perfect, thank you. Phil, any thoughts on the poll results? Anything that's surprising there, or was it as you expected?
I guess the thing that that I would say seems a little bit disconnected with the results of the survey is empowering investors to access the information when they want it and how they want it. When you look at the results of the survey, the respondents that we had, was that very few of them can respond to those needs in a fast time today. We're struggling with trying to give them access to ad hoc requests on a timely basis, any kinds of changes to the formats of the reports, and never mind access to the underlying data. So it's interesting because this, to me, this seems to be a broader chasm between where they are now and where they would like to be.
Interesting. Yes, thank you. Greg, any additional thoughts on the poll results? Anything there that surprised you, or is that in line with kind of how you're thinking about things?
Nothing too surprising. I had to laugh a little bit because when I was thinking about our kind of investment planning cycle and kind of going to our different groups to kind of make the case for investment dollars for some of the enhancements we want to do to our client portals, it feels like each of these had like a double click analysis into kind of showing it. And I agree, like client retention is a very hard metric to show, but we do believe that, you know, the client experience along with the kind of investment returns, of course, and whatnot, are really the reasons why, you know, clients would want to, you know, invest with us and stay with us and perhaps grow with us. And so, you know, I completely agree with all these things, and it kind of gave us the buy-in that we needed as an organization to continue to make the necessary investments to support that experience.
Lovely, thank you. And once again, you've teed me up quite nicely because you're talking about investment cases. And my next question is actually, you know, what are the key considerations when building business cases for digital portals? And I'll come to you in a second, Greg, but Phil, perhaps if I can ask you first, you know, what are the most important factors when it comes to building the business case for a portal?
Well, I think what we read in the survey was that many customers in who do client reporting today struggle with that. And I think the biggest issue that I saw was the lack of connection to some of the strategic drivers in their business, such as, you know, digital transformation, client experience, some of the things that Greg just highlighted. And I think the most important thing on building a business case is to not only focus on those efficiency drivers. You know, you looked at what people are measuring today, the KPIs today, they're very much focused on how fast can I generate, how many can I generate, how inexpensively can I generate, but that's all creating more input. And I think we need to help customers focus on creating KPIs on the outputs, you know, the business measures, the business drivers, the business outcomes that they're trying to achieve, not necessarily only the efficiency, which is always a critical part of it, but it's not necessarily a needle moving aspect of a business case. Second, a couple of other things I would say is, you know, the economics of the cloud. I mean, how fast does it take you to add new content to your current platform? How long does it take you to respond to ad hoc requests? How quickly can you deliver access to the underlying content to the customer? And can you be sure that it's always going to be the same data if they take it through 2 different channels? Adding new services, new value adds such as ESG data and things like that, which are, you know, really value add, not just doing what you do better, faster, cheaper, but really adding value to the business relationship and driving customer engagement.
Sorry. Thank you, Phil. Greg, as somebody who has built portals, you know, how did you build the business case for them, and how do you what are some of the most important factors when it comes to, or considerations when it comes to building those business cases successfully?
Sure, I'll touch on some of the pieces. I mean, I think Phil hit on a lot of them. Obviously, you know, the client adoption, the client retention, that's critical, right? Some of it, we just recognize that it's a necessary investment to make just to kind of keep up with the industry norms and trends. So that's just kind of a leap of faith that you have to make to a certain degree. But some more tangible things that I think you really can put, you know, hard numbers around. There is an operational efficiency consideration. Thinking about, you know, a large volume of onboarding. If you have to kind of collect client information through paper forms, think about all the operational resources that it takes to kind of take that client information. Also, not to say even the risk of, you know, perhaps fat fingering something in to a system and then the client impact from that. And so can you claim some of the, you know, perhaps operational benefits of capturing some of that in digital form so that it can kind of seamlessly integrate with your other servicing platforms in the enterprise? The other piece that I think is super critical in today's kind of data security world is, you know, it gives me anxiety to think about important documents being sent out to clients through email or, you know, whatever mechanism they may be. And so we really take info security very seriously at our firm. And we think that kind of the right encryption and methods in a secure portal environment is the right way to be sending some of this critical information. So that's also a piece that sometimes gets overlooked. And so, you know, companies, some of those may be operational and data security considerations with some of the obvious benefits of growing our client base and being able to scale up and meeting the client's needs. Usually it's a pretty good discussion at our organization around why we need to make some of these, what I would call foundational investments.
Thank you for sharing that with us. We've got a poll question coming up next, but before I put that live, I've spotted a question in the chat function, and I just wanted to remind everybody that if you want to ask questions, if you can do it in the Q&A so that we can see them properly, that's great, and please do keep asking questions. Now for our next poll. So hopefully that should go live on our screen imminently. Yes, so this one is, do you believe traditional PDF client reporting will reach the end of its life cycle within the next 3 years? And your options are, no, it will remain a significant part of overall client reporting and communications. No, there will always be room for it, but it will take a backseat to digital communications and reporting. Or yes, it will be replaced entirely by digital and interactive communications. So if you could all answer that, and we're going to do another panel question while you're answering, and then we'll come back and discuss the results at the end. So my next question is looking at some of the survey results in more depth. So the recent survey found that nearly 2/3 of respondents believe that there will always be a place for PDF reporting, even if it takes a backseat to digital reporting in the future. Does this indicate a disconnect in the industry about what the expectations are for a digital customer experience? Phil, coming to you first, what do you think? Is there a disconnect here?
You know, certainly we're in early stages of what a digital experience really means, and PDFs, as Greg has already noted, they continue to send out PDFs. That's what customers have come to expect. But if you really have a good digital platform distribution capability, then you can give a client what they want. And maybe today they're still heavily reliant on PDFs, but over time that's certainly going to change. The other thing is, if you're just emailing PDFs or it's a one-way communication of PDFs, you have no way of understanding what are they using. Are they opening it? Are they reading it? Are they sharing it with other people? So it's really, I don't know if it's a disconnect, but it's certainly behavior changes over time. And it's clear, I think, that things are going in one direction. So while there is a heavy dependence on PDFs today, I doubt that that 5 years from now, that will be the main way of consuming information.
Thank you. Paul, coming to you next on this one. Is there a disconnect in the industry about the expectations? Will there always be a place for PDF reporting? What's your take on all of this?
Sure. I don't necessarily think there's a disconnect. I think some in the industry, there's a realization that they don't have the infrastructure to deliver an interactive experience that's worthwhile at this very moment, right? We talked to a lot of firms that have not even considered investing. So in 3 years' time, you can ask Gregory about this. It takes a long time to develop a comprehensive kind of portal, and you have to go through the different stages and getting client feedback. So within 3 years, I don't think they if they're not already starting now, it's hard to see that being a dominant force in 3 years' time. So that's why I think this is the results that have come out. And we did kind of follow up with some of the asset managers who said that, look, maybe in 5 years, they'll give a different answer where, digital reporting will become the dominant form of client reporting communications. But, I think within 3 years, it's definitely about this duality that exists, right? You're still doing the traditional sense, the clients that want it. Some clients still want physical paper, reports, not even PDFs. So, we're still in a world where that exists, and in certain segments and certain geographies, that's the norm. So I think we're just trying to get over that hurdle for some firms. But yeah, again, it's about servicing multiple client needs. And I think this is why this question kind of implies there's a duality there, and that they don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place to support a fully comprehensive client experience yet. So, maybe 5 years that they will. But yeah, until then, I think, this is what would be, what we expect PDFs to continue for a little bit longer, definitely.
Great, thank you. Greg, coming to you last, what do you think about What do you think about this? Is there a disconnect here? You know, will there always, do you think your clients will always want some sort of PDF reporting, or do you think that it will be entirely replaced? What's your kind of view on all of this?
We need to be flexible to service what the clients want now. And, you know, 5 years from now, it's very difficult to predict exactly what clients would want. I think we'd all agree that there's certainly going to be a shift to portals, but I'd be hard pressed to say that 100% of clients 5 years from now are consuming this fully digitally. We still see, you know, a great kind of relationship management opportunity to have a monthly or quarterly PDF where our relationship managers use that as a starting point for discussions with the client. And so we still see that even if it lives in a portal, it's still kind of a formalized document that kind of is, you know, memorialized every month or every quarter, depending on the investment structure. The good news, and why I don't think it's conflicting, is some of the data challenges that we've heard. You solve the data challenges for reporting, then you kind of solve the data challenges for the portal. So we actually feel good about kind of, you know, getting a little more bang for our buck and investing in our upstream kind of data issues, or not issues, but things that we want to improve upon, I should say. Is then that'll support not only our reporting cycles, but also the information we want to share in portals. And I think it came from Phil, you know, it is critical that the information we're sharing in reporting and portal tie one-to-one, right? That would kind of create some questions and confusion as to why things aren't tying. So we really want to make sure that it's done in unison. So I think it should all be kind of done as one program, as opposed to some reporting effort on the side and a portal effort on the side. It needs to all be thought of kind of together.
Perfect, thank you. I think now would be a really great time to hopefully see our poll results and see where our audience today kind of stood on this issue. So hopefully, there they are. So kind of similar to what we were just talking about. So 71% of people said that there will always be room for traditional PDF reporting, but it'll take a backseat to digital communications and reporting. 19% said it will remain a significant part of overall communications, and just 10% said it would be replaced entirely by digital communications. So very much our audience saying that there will be the majority of our audience saying that there will be some role for traditional PDF reporting. Phil, is this what we were expecting from our audience poll? Is there any surprises here for you?
No, I think that's very similar to what we hear from clients, what we've heard from Greg today, that this is currently, you know, it wasn't, you know, there was the first stage, which was digitizing printed documents, which are PDFs, and that will be here for a while as we bring on new ways of communicating content that are much more usable to clients, because quite frankly, a PDF isn't that usable, you know, if you need to then take that data and do something with it, whether it's exporting it into a different, you know, your own internal system. So.
Lovely. Paul, anything surprising here for you at all from these poll reports? Anything, you know, is it surprising that so few people, just 1 in 10, think that PDFs will be entirely replaced?
No, not at all, because we had 0. So we had no manager who thought that. So I guess this group that we have here is optimistic. So, you know, we had 64%, I believe, with the same answer, and the poll had 71. So very close, right? It's about pushing digital communications a little bit forward, you know, PDF taking a back seat, but never, no, it's not going to replace it, right? It's about doing both. And I think one asset manager was, you know, I spoke to was quite, you know, phrased it quite easily, right? You know, every client wants something different, you know, why not cater for everyone? So it's, you know, you're not replacing, right? It's about offering more, right? Because you need to compete somehow, like Phil said, right? It's hard to compete on the range of, you know, strategies now. It's hard to compete on price, you know. You can try to compete on performance, but it's, you know, as we know, it's never always the case that that's going to work out. So, you know, what else are you going to try to compete on? And client service, client experience, that's something that you can at least, you know, see some tangible results with the kind of experience that the clients are having.
Perfect, thank you. Greg, to you last, you know, anything more to add here? I guess our audience is slightly more progressive, with 10% of people thinking that it will be replaced entirely. What's your take on this poll?
We'll be ready to roll with the punches if the industry does go to that 10%, and that's kind of what we're preparing for. But no, I think the overwhelming majority of kind of that middle option actually kind of confirms what our take on this was, that we need to invest both in, we can't just keep the PDFs flat. We need to continue to invest in that to support the client experience in addition to the client portal. So it's a good, playback from the industry about confirming kind of what we're focused on. So no surprises from my perspective.
Lovely. Okay, I think we've got time for a quick audience question now. So there's one I spotted in the chat that hidden amongst the chat. So it was, where do the topics of investor education, advisor practice management, and/or thought leadership content fit into the digital strategy? So Greg, for you guys, where does your kind of education, advising, thought leadership fit in with your digital strategy and, I guess, portals too?
Yeah, today, to be transparent, we don't have a strong, I would say, digital presence. We believe in all of the investor education, practice management, thought leadership. We do a lot of that, but it's not currently part of our existing portal. However, I'm glad the question was asked, because that was, as I talk about a roadmap and some of the things that we're kind of doing beta testing on, we believe that, as a firm, we do a good job of all these things. And again, not saying that every, wealth advisor is going to want to go to a portal to get some of this information. Sometimes they'd rather, pick up the phone, or they prefer kind of an emailed link to maybe our recent thought on ESG investing as an example. But again, kind of the overall theme of what we've been talking about here, we would love to include this in our digital strategy to give advisors the option to consume this in that self-service world. Because you got to imagine across all of our wealth, our wealth clients, some are going to still prefer to have maybe the traditional ways to get some of this education, and some are going to prefer to do more of a self-service model. So it's a great question, and it's part of our roadmap. We're not necessarily where we want to be today, but it's certainly something that we value.
Great, thank you. Paul, I guess the same question. We're just running on time, by the way, so if everybody can keep their answers succinct, that would be useful. But where does kind of advice, where does all of that stuff fit into this digital roadmap, education, all that stuff fit into this digital strategy? Did you get any insight from that?
Yeah, so we did speak to a few wealth managers, obviously, as part of the wider study. And I guess the business case for them to engage with their clients, especially where we see the wealth transfer from the older generation to younger generations, they're expecting a little bit more of this client experience. Whether you tie that in with client education or thought leadership, that can also be hosted and distributed via a portal, so you can see data usage there and see if it's valuable. But we see that things like commentary from the portfolio manager, the person making investment decisions, is something that people want to see, and you can call that investor education if you want. But it's just more of a additional connecting point where you can actually know, or kind of humanize the person that's doing the investments that on your behalf. So again, a lot of these things can be additional features of a portal, but again, it's a growing area, and expect more, I think, from providers and in the space.
Thank you. And Phil, perhaps you can leave us with a very brief final thought on that question.
I think the industry is in kind of a crawl, walk, run phase here. So in the first phase, people are really looking just to put the foundation in place for what is definitely going to be a digital journey. And in that, they're looking to enable customer self-service, they're enabling personalization, and they're enabling client analytics, so that so when they do experiment with new content and things like this, they can really understand in tangible, measurable ways, how does that affect the client interaction, the client engagement. And so then they'll be able to experiment with these things and have knowledge then of what's working, what's not working, and spend more time on what's working, less time on what's not.
Perfect, thank you. What a great note to end on. So as we are pretty much out of time, I wanted to thank all of our audience for joining us. I wanted to thank our wonderful, wonderful panel for speaking so freely and sharing all of the great experience and expertise you have in this area. I've certainly learned a lot, and I hope all of our audience has too. So thank you very much.